This is the west coast of Ireland. And in 1944, on this beach, a Canadian airman washed ashore. His aircraft had been patrolling the Atlantic looking for U-boats, and in fact, they had found two. They courageously attacked them, but were shot down during the effort. Of the 6 crew, only 1 body was recovered. The locals buried him nearby, and his grave is still there. This is the old cemetery in Ballyconneely. During the Second World War, Canadians fought and died throughout the world, in the Far East, in Africa, and in Europe. But there are few monuments to these men and their achievements, and the only true memorials are their graves. This is the grave of Pilot Officer Ivor Smithson, 407 Demon Squadron, Coastal Command, Royal Canadian Air Force. He was from Windsor, Ontario, and he died 11th of March, 1944, and he rests here in Ireland, a long way from home. Ivor Smithson was one of more than 40,000 Canadians who died in the Second World War for king and country.
September 1st, 1939. Germany invades Poland. As war begins in Europe, thousands try to flee. Among them is a family from Hamilton, Ontario. With her parents and her older sister Margaret, 5-year-old Jacqueline Hayworth boards the liner Athenia bound for Montreal.
After dinner, we went out on deck. The ship was all dark. The lights were out, so submarines couldn't see it. Margaret and I sat on the hatch top, and then the torpedo hit. Shrapnel flew everywhere. A piece tore a gash in Margaret's forehead. Margaret went into the lifeboat. It was the worst moment of my life. Margaret never regained consciousness, and she died a few days later.
September 10th, the day after Margaret dies. The government of Canada declares war on Nazi Germany and calls for volunteers. In 1939, Canada's armed forces are virtually non-existent.
Adult, you've bitten off much more than you can chew.
But in a few short weeks, 60,000 volunteer for the Army, Navy, and Air Force.
Blimey, adult, you toddle off.
This is Mount Royal Cemetery in Montreal, and this is the grave of Canada's greatest soldier, Sir Arthur Currie. Currie commanded the Canadians in the First World War to their great victories in 1918, and he turned the Canadians into the most efficient fighting force on the Western Front. When he died in 1933, his comrades erected this cross of sacrifice, and they used one of Currie's own quotes here at the base. "They served till death, why not we?" The Canadians developed a tremendous reputation in the First World War, and in 1939, they passed their torch on to their sons.
Christmas, 1939. The first Canadian troops land in Britain. But before they can get into the fight, France falls in June 1940. and the defeated British Army retreats to England without most of its weapons, leaving the 1st Canadian Division as the only fully armed force left to repel the imminent German invasion. England is alone, and Canada has become her greatest ally.
This is London, and these are the Houses of Parliament, a symbol of Britain for more than 150 years. In the summer of 1940, they became a symbol of freedom. After the fall of France, Britain and her empire stood alone, and overnight, Canada became Britain's greatest ally. We'd already sent a division here, and they were guarding the southern coast against German invasion. But the first Canadians to see action were the Canadians in the Royal Air Force. The Battle of Britain was to be fought in the air, and these skies were the battlefield.
July 1940. The German armies that have conquered Europe are preparing to cross the English Channel and invade Britain. But to win the Battle of Britain, the Germans must have command of the air. They must destroy Britain's Royal Air Force. With no air force, Britain will be defenseless. Now Britain's last line of defense are the fighter pilots. Flying with the Royal Air Force and with the Royal Canadian Air Force are more than 100 Canadians. Among them is a 24-year-old flight lieutenant, Robert Barton.
I was very fond of flying. It was like driving a car, only you were having much more fun still. I was very much afraid, always on takeoff. I found that when we started to get up, gaining altitude, I found that if you sighted the enemy, a lot of your fear disappeared. It was rather marvelous because, God, there they are. There they are. You've had it, boy. This is it. There were 100 of them at least. That to me was something unbelievable. We attacked, and the first aircraft I shot at didn't do anything. It just stayed in formation. Then I tried another one, and as he went down, I followed him, and I followed him all the way. I said, all right, this one I'm going to make sure he's bloody well down, because this is a crazy business.
Though they shoot down many enemy aircraft, the pilots of the RAF and RCAF are vastly outnumbered, facing a massive German fleet of over 3,000 fighters and bombers. This now is the crucial battlefield.
This is Duxford Airstrip north of London. In 1940, it was a fighter base, and it was from bases such as this all across southern England that the Battle of Britain was fought. And this is the legendary Spitfire. This Spitfire has Polish markings. There were a number of Polish squadrons in the Battle of Britain. In fact, one of them was commanded by a Canadian, Johnny Kent of Winnipeg. You can see the armament over here. This is the machine guns. They'd fire 303 bullets, and there's 2 on this side, of course 2 on the other. And they're operated from the cockpit. But you can actually see the sights up here, and there's the joystick with the button controlling the machine guns. The Spitfire was a beautifully designed plane. It's sleek, and it was the darling of the Battle of Britain. But the true workhorse was the Hurricane.
Leading a squadron of Hurricanes is 26-year-old Johnny Kent.
The North Old Wing was scrambled, with myself leading 3 squadrons, a grand total of 9 airplanes, all that was left on our airfield. We climbed to about 11,000 feet, and then without any warning, there was a loud bang as my engine blew out and caught fire. My aircraft rapidly lost speed, and the other aircraft shot past me. All except one. It was Hilly Brown, who called me on the radio saying, "Ha, bloody ha, you getting hot in there, bud?" This was for a lot of ribbing I'd been giving him for having been shot down and burnt a few days before.
There were two groups of Canadians in the Battle of Britain. The largest group were Canadians who enlisted in the RAF in the late 1930s. These men had battle experience in France, and there's even a couple aces amongst them, Hilly Brown and Johnny Kent. The other group was 401 Squadron RCAF, and they joined the battle in late August 1940. Between the two, 100 Canadians fought in the Battle of Britain, and 1 in 5 did not survive.
In the first weeks of the battle, both the RAF and the Germans lose many planes over the Channel and southern England. But in the last weeks of August, the Luftwaffe shifts the attack to the RAF itself to prepare the way for the invasion of England.
This is the North Weald airstrip, and in 1940 it was home to Butch Barton's 249 Squadron. North Weald was attacked in September 1940. The German Heinkel bombers came over this direction here, and of course they caught the Hurricanes on the ground. The men had to scramble, get into the aircraft, and get off while the airstrip is blowing up and being strafed by German fighters.
Holy Christmas, everything was coming down on top of us. Bombs, etc., etc. And all I could do was look up and see aircraft above. And if that stuff was coming down, God damn it, it had to be enemy aircraft. So I took off and flew into it. They were so busy trying to get home. They were not defending anything. They were just flying out. They'd done an attack and they were homeward bound. Little did they know that they got a few enemy aircraft right in their midst. And shot at 3 quite seriously.
Life for a Battle of Britain pilot was very stressful. They waited their dispersal from dawn to dusk. They usually scrambled 3-4 times a day. They always encountered the enemy, and they were usually outnumbered. This took a terrible toll on the pilots of the RAF, and by mid-September 1940, they were losing the Battle of Britain.
When you just think you're going to get one, and you get hit, that's a very nasty thing. You say, oh, hell, that's great, that's bad. Oh my God, the damn thing, the airplane's on fire. What a disappointment. And what fear now? What fear? How do I get out of this damn thing? As I fell through the sky, I said, well, now you better open your parachute. You better find that the ripcord on the parachute at your chest. Now find that, fella. You're falling through the sky. And when I finally landed, I didn't roll over anything. I just stripped the tree down, and there I was, standing at the bottom with a stripped pear tree in somebody's backyard. And some days I'd be shot down and I would come back in the same day and fly another airplane into the battle.